And so with that analysis, we said, well, if we're going to start with democracy and the lack of it, then we need to start with an assertion of rights. And in fact, whereas human rights has been so long and increasingly an international phenomenon, we said the fact and the lack of human rights in the United States is in urban cities is the rights that we need to line up with and assert. So we went from democracy to the assertion of our rights, and then finally is the question then of power. And as an organizer, all the vision in the world doesn't matter if you can't have a strategy of power to realize it. And so then what is a strategy for power? How do you take democracy and human rights at the core and combine it with a strategy of power that starts to turn the tide? And so over the last year, we've been facing this question as we've been moving out of our silos, as we've been moving out of our organizational silos, as we've been moving out of our city and neighborhood silos into regions and into national conversations. So what I wanted to share with you was a conversation that's still in the making. It's a conversation that we started a month ago. 400 delegates from all over the country got together, and there's core right to the city organizations, which are mostly base building, community organizing groups, but also academics, scholars, researchers, writers from Los Angeles, the Bay Area, New York, Rhode Island, New England, Washington, D.C., and Virginia area, Miami, New Orleans, and now Chicago. And so 400 delegates got together, and everyone's intention was what the intention is here, which is how do we move from the low points in progressive power to a movement? But the fact was, most of us did not ever in our lives experience what a movement really is. Our experience with the movement, well, for me, was eyes on the prize. And then in 2001, I went to the World Social Forum with Steve Williams from Power here in San Francisco, and we saw a movement in Brazil in the making. But when we came back to the reality of what we were facing in the United States. And so when we tried to imagine to build a movement, we found that what we were often doing is either revolving on nostalgia on one end, idealism on the other, or our own imagination of black leather jackets and berets in between those two, like my comedy act. And so we said, well, then it won't be good enough for us, secondly, to just say that what we've experienced now, even the best of what we experience now, that more of that will automatically make a movement, right? Because even in our victories, it's in the context without a movement. So then what is it that we are looking for that's not what we know, but what from what we know can inform what we want to be? So the question is then, what from our current practice, from what we understand, from what we've been informed, what glimpses can we get about a movement? And if we're serious about it, then how do we actually start naming that rather than just saying movement, movement, movement? And how does it move from the term of the day to a blueprint for practice? So I want to share with you a conversation that's still evolving with us that looks at our present practice, says what are our challenges, what do we need to be able to do to be able to get to that other place as a process in motion. And so my one campaign promise that I'll make to you is that this is going to be the simplest PowerPoint you have ever seen, ever. It was almost handwritten, but I was told they can't read your writing. So I played with it. It will guarantee you be the easiest one you've ever seen. So we talked about what it takes to build a movement, and we came with 6 propositions. So building a movement in 6 easy steps. Number 1, the recognition that our present scale of our organizations, of our base, was wholly inadequate to be able to lead and make any kind of fundamental change. And in order to be able to reach a scale that matters, our methodologies, including entry into much bigger scale contests like elections, like the electoral arena, had to be done. But also that we will never have enough staff to build a movement. That if we do not build into the consciousness of our leadership that it is their job to get their organizations to scale, and that they own that concept, that we will never succeed. So our job then is to not only get to scale, but we have to get to scale in a way that's sustainable, and that can only be done by the development, the qualitative development and investment in our grassroots leadership. Number two, the New Majority Alliance. And when we do build our base and build our organizations, we often do that first and only, and do not figure out who else we need to win. So that in the present historical juncture, with the level of alienation of just about everyone, particularly in the cities, whether because a skyscraper is, overlooks their beautiful bay view, or because they too cannot reap the rewards of public infrastructure, there is a huge possibility for the ideas of a right to a city not just to be for our working class people of color membership, but for those ideas to be engaged in and to actually build a majoritarian movement in our cities.